Question number 3, Moama Fox.
Tēnā koe te mana whakawā. He pātai reo Māori tēnei. He pātai tēnei ki te minita o te kāwana atakiwā. He ahanga kōwhiringa hau kua tiro hia e ia, kia nui ake ai ngā māngai o te tangata whenua i runga kaunihira a takiwā, kaunihira a haukainga.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I'm always willing to look at how to improve representation overall with local government, but I don't currently have any plans to make changes to the current settings. However, in response to submissions made about Māori representation during the Local Government Act Amendment Bill last year, the then Associate Minister directed officials to work with relevant parties, including Te Puni Kokiri, and report back to ministers in March next year with advice about Māori participation in local government processes, and I will consider that advice when I receive it.
He pātai anō.
Supplementary question, Marama Fox.
Kei te whakapuno tonu e ia ki tāna e ki. He pai te tikanga mō ngā pōtitanga o ngā kaunihira ārohe, he aha te take, kai te rima ira whitu pai hinati o ngā māngai a kaunihira hurinoa i te motu he Māori.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I do think the right settings are currently in place, and as I've said before, I'm always willing to consider advice. I'm not sure that it is a piece of legislation that Parliament should actually pass to change the representation that is on councils. As we have seen over time and in this Parliament itself, we've seen an increase in Māori participation, and I certainly encourage that. I think it should be in both local and central government. I personally, though, don't think it's a piece of legislation that does that. I think it is by being actively involved, by how the process is, and about having the kind of backing locally to put a strong candidate forward that can hold on their own account. And if they are Māori, then I certainly encourage that.
Pātai anō.
Marama Fox, supplementary question.
Te mana whakawā. Ka tautoko āwaha a pūtea te minita i ngā kaunihira ārohe me ngā mea hei whakapiki i ngā tangata Māori kia tū ai hei māngai mō ngā kaunihira a takiwā, hurino i te motu, me na kāri i te tautoko, tēnei huarahi he aha ai.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I won't be supporting resourcing councils, so we won't be giving them any other funding so that they can go out there and increase Māori participation. But what I will say is that we actively support and encourage Māori participation on councils. I would like to see more standing, but I would like them to get there on their merit. I think that there is a power machine behind our iwi, particularly our iwi leaders as we see them now, and if they were putting a strong campaign together behind that right candidate, then they could get there.
Question, supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Given the Minister's second and third answer on the question of resourcing separatist systems, what was the government's position with respect to the Auckland Super City, where there is a statutory body resourced by the ratepayer as a result of central government legislation which represents not Kiwi over iwi, but a principle that was sold down the drain by her and her government?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, to get past the grandstanding, what I would say is that well, it was absolutely. So that's fine, that's good. What I would say is that Auckland had 7 councils coming together as one, well 8 really. So what we saw there was a number of different initiatives. We felt that it was the right step at that time to try and ensure that there was representation, particularly in a place as big as Auckland. However, I'm always willing to have another look at whether or not the settings are right, and it is one that I'm taking an interest in.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Who was grandstanding when they said Kiwi not iwi, or one law for all, and then in the case of the Auckland Super City has a statutory body with millions of dollars of support now required to look at most applications for resource changes, and is that a case of the National Party selling principles down the road?
Mr.
Insofar as this ministerial responsibility...
Well, I was just going to point out to the member that the year is 2014 and not 2005, which is when that was actually done.
Question number 4, Dr Parmjeet Palmer.